The silence was what woke Marcus Brennan. Not an alarm, not the California sun slicing through the blackout curtains of his Palo Alto mansion, not even the distant hum of the city beginning its Monday morning ritual, but a profound, unnatural stillness, the kind that settles into a room after something vital has been removed. His hand reached across the king-size bed before his eyes opened, seeking the familiar warmth of his wife's body. His fingers met only cold silk, undisturbed and smooth. The sheets on Elena's side were pulled tight, hospital corner perfect, as if no one had slept there at all. Marcus opened his eyes. The bedroom was bathed in that peculiar gray light that comes just before dawn, when the world exists in a state of suspended animation. Everything looked the same. The custom-built closet with its automated lighting, the Eames chair in the corner where Elena would sit and read, the panoramic windows offering a view of the manicured garden below. Yet something fundamental had shifted. He sat up, the Italian cotton sheets falling away from his bare chest. The house felt wrong. Empty in a way that had nothing to do with physical absence and everything to do with the sudden removal of a presence he had grown so accustomed to that he only noticed it now in its absence. The aroma of single-origin Colombian coffee, the usual prelude to his day, was conspicuously absent. Elena always had it ready by 6:30. It was one of the rules. One of the many small rituals that kept their life running smoothly, kept everything in its proper place. Marcus swung his legs out of bed, his feet finding the heated floors. Even they felt cold this morning. "Elena!" His voice echoed off the marble floors, bouncing back to him with a hollow quality that made the house feel larger than its 8,000 square feet. He walked through the master suite, past the spa bathroom with its rainfall shower and soaking tub, into the hallway. The lights activated automatically as he moved, sensors tracking his progress through his own home. "Elena!" Louder this time, annoyed now. She knew better than to disrupt the morning routine. He had a board meeting at 9. The Henderson situation required his full attention, and he needed his coffee, needed everything to be exactly as it should be. The kitchen was pristine. Spotless, stainless steel appliances reflected his image back at him, a man in silk pajama bottoms, his hair slightly mussed, his expression darkening by the second. The Maile coffee maker sat cold and silent. No beans grinding, no water heating, no Elena moving through the space with that careful precision he had come to expect. Then he saw it, a single drop of blood near the garage door, perfect and round, like a period at the end of a sentence. Dark red against the white marble, not yet fully dried. His heart rate spiked. Marcus moved toward it, his bare feet silent on the cold stone. The blood was fresh, recent. He looked up at the door, then back toward the island where his phone usually sat charging overnight. It was there, but Elena's was not. He picked up his phone and opened the family tracking app, the one he had insisted she install 2 years ago. For safety, he had told her. So he would always know where she was, always be able to reach her, always be able to protect her. The screen loaded. Elena's phone showed a location. The kitchen. Right here. Right where he stood. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the space. Then he saw it. Her iPhone, screen shattered into a spider web of cracks, lying on the island counter. Deliberately placed, deliberately destroyed, his chest tightened. This was not like her. Elena did not break things. Elena did not deviate from routine. Elena did not leave. He walked back through the house, moving faster now, checking rooms with increasing urgency. Her study, empty. The guest bedrooms, undisturbed. The home gym where she spent her mornings, silent and dark. The master closet. Marcus stood in the doorway, his hand on the frame. Elena's side of the massive walk-in space looked the same as always. Designer dresses hanging in perfect color, coordinated rows. Shoes arranged by style and season. Handbags displayed like art pieces. Everything in its place. But the safe was open, not the main safe, the one they both knew about, where he kept important documents and a modest amount of cash. The smaller one, built into the wall behind a panel in the shoe section. The one he had not known existed. Empty now. The door hanging open like a mouth caught mid-scream. Marcus stepped closer, his hands shaking slightly. Inside the small cavity, nothing remained except a faint smell of leather and metal. No indication of what had been stored there. No clue to how long it had been there. Hidden in plain sight, in his own home. He turned and walked back to the bedroom. That was when he saw the ring. Elena's wedding band sat on her nightstand, positioned with careful deliberation on top of a white cloth napkin. The 3-carat diamond caught the growing morning light and threw it back in sharp, accusatory fragments. Next to it, her engagement ring. The 5-carat emerald cut stone he had presented to her 8 years ago at a restaurant in San Francisco, dropping to one knee while a string quartet played and other diners applauded. She had said yes with tears in her eyes. Happy tears, he had thought at the time. Now, staring at the rings abandoned on the nightstand, he wondered if he had ever really known what Elena was thinking, what Elena was feeling, what Elena was planning. The garage. He had not checked the garage. Marcus moved quickly now, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his bare feet slapping against the wood. The garage door opened with a quiet mechanical hum. The space was designed to hold 4 vehicles. His Tesla Model S sat in its usual spot, plugged into the charging station, its sleek black body gleaming under the LED lights. His Porsche 911, weekend toy, covered with a custom-fitted tarp. But the third spot, where Elena's white Tesla Model X usually sat, was empty. The charging cable hung loose, unplugged, swaying slightly in the air current from the open door. She had taken the car, left her phone, left her rings, left blood. Marcus stood in the empty garage, the concrete cold beneath his feet, and felt his carefully constructed world begin to tilt on its axis. This was not a trip to the spa. This was not running errands. This was not Elena being forgetful or careless or any of the things that would require a reprimand later. This was something else entirely. This was a statement. The Palo Alto mansion had been designed by a renowned architect whose work graced the covers of Architectural Digest and Dwell. Glass, steel, and Italian marble, combined in a symphony of modern luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered sweeping views of the Santa Cruz Mountains. Smart home technology controlled everything from the temperature to the lighting to the security system. It was a house that could be monitored and managed from anywhere in the world, a fortress of comfort and control. And it had soundproofed walls, a feature Marcus had specifically requested. For privacy, he had told the architect, for peace and quiet in a busy world. But the truth he did not speak aloud, was that soundproofed walls were useful for other reasons. They absorbed sounds that did not need to travel beyond their confines. Conversations that should remain private. Disagreements that should not reach the ears of neighbors or staff. Arguments that sometimes escalated beyond words. The walls had absorbed the prelude to Elena's disappearance. Every word, every threat, every moment of the night that had preceded this terrible silent morning. It had started, as it often did, with frustration. In the previous evening, Marcus had returned from the office carrying the weight of a catastrophic failure. The EtherCore Biotech acquisition, a deal he had been cultivating for 3 months, had collapsed in the final hours. $200 million in projected revenue, a strategic move that would have positioned Brennan Innovations as a major player in the biotech space. His legacy deal, he had called it in interviews, the defining transaction of his career. Gone. The lead investor had pulled out at the last moment. Ethical concerns, they said, questions about corporate culture, whispers about how Marcus Brennan treated his employees, his partners, his subordinates, anonymous sources speaking to board members, raising doubts, planting seeds of suspicion. Marcus had spent the drive home with his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his jaw so tight it ached. 3 months of work, hundreds of hours of negotiations, all destroyed by someone who decided to talk when they should have remained silent. He knew how information leaked. Someone on his team had talked to someone outside the company. Someone had shared details about closed-door meetings, about how he managed his business, about incidents that should have remained private. And he had his suspicions about who. Marcus pulled into the garage at 7:15 in the evening. Elena was in the kitchen, as she always was at that hour, preparing dinner. She wore a dove-gray cashmere sweater, designer jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She looked up as he entered, and he saw the recognition flicker across her face, the subtle tightening around her eyes, the infinitesimal straightening of her spine. She knew, just by looking at him. 8 years of marriage had taught her to read the pressure gauges of his moods, to calculate the danger level of his silence, to predict with unfortunate accuracy how the evening would unfold. Elena moved with practiced efficiency, setting down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables. Her hands were steady. Her expression was carefully neutral. She was already making herself smaller, already preparing for impact. "Your coffee, darling." Her voice was a melody of practiced sweetness. She had made it despite the hour, despite knowing he preferred it in the morning. An offering, a gesture of appeasement. The designer sleeves of her sweater hid the faint yellowing of bruises from the previous week when he had gripped her arms too hard during a disagreement about her spending habits. Marcus did not look up from his phone. His thumb scrolled through emails, through messages from his attorney, through the carefully worded statement his PR team had prepared explaining the deal's collapse. "The word from my source is that someone on the board got a call," he said, his voice flat and cold. "An anonymous tip about our aggressive corporate culture, about how we operate internally." He looked up then, his eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Elena saw what was coming as clearly as if he had announced it. His expression was not angry. Not yet. It was something worse. It was calculating. Cold. The look of a man deciding exactly how to inflict maximum impact with minimum evidence. Funny, isn't it, how private matters find their way out? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. A frantic bird in a cage of bone, but her face remained placid, a mask perfected over years of necessity. She knew the script. She knew her lines. Deviation meant escalation. "That's terrible, Marcus. I'm so sorry." "Sorry." He moved toward her, his 6'2" frame eclipsing the evening light coming through the windows. Marcus Brennan was handsome in the cruel way of predators. Strong jaw, clear eyes, a smile that had charmed investors and clients and board members for decades. His charisma was legendary in Silicon Valley. People said he could sell anything to anyone, that he had a gift for making others see things his way. Elena knew that charisma was simply another form of control. His hands shot out, not in a strike, but with a deceptive gentleness. His fingers found her jaw, his thumb stroking the line of bone beneath her skin. The touch was almost tender, but the pressure increased incrementally, just enough to send a clear message. Not enough to leave a mark. Never enough to leave obvious marks. "You haven't been talking to your sister again, have you? Sharing our private business?" Diana, her twin sister, her lifeline to a world outside this beautiful prison. Their weekly calls had been one of the few freedoms Elena had managed to maintain, though Marcus monitored them carefully. Speakerphone only, no privacy. He listened to every word, analyzed every pause, searched for codes and hidden meanings, and he had found them eventually. The childhood references that meant something different to twins who had grown up with their own language. The mentions of flowers that signified different levels of danger. He had forbidden the calls 3 months ago after he decoded one conversation and realized they had been communicating right under his nose for years. "Of course not," Elena said softly. "I know the rules." "Good girl." His thumb pressed harder, just below her ear. The pressure made her eyes water, but she did not pull away. Pulling away would be resistance. Resistance meant escalation. Escalation meant a trip to urgent care with another fabricated story about clumsiness, about falling, about being so silly and accident-prone. "Because rules keep us safe," Marcus continued, his breath warm against her face. It smelled of expensive whiskey, the bottle he kept in his office for moments when the stress of empire building became too much. "They keep us together. You understand that, don't you, Elena? Rules are how we maintain order, how we maintain control." Marcus leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing her ear. "The Henderson deal was my baby, and when I lose something, I find something else to break. You understand that, don't you?" Elena gave the smallest nod, barely perceptible, just enough to acknowledge without inviting more. He seemed satisfied. The anger that had been building in him throughout the drive home, throughout the walk from garage to kitchen, found its outlet in her submission. Her fear, her careful, calculated compliance. Marcus released her jaw and turned back to his phone, the moment passing as quickly as it had arrived. Elena remained still, her hand moving slowly to her throat, feeling the pulse hammering beneath the skin. "I have a board meeting in the morning," Marcus said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike, as if the previous interaction had not occurred at all. "Damage control for this disaster. Lay out my gray Armani suit, the one with the thin pinstripe, and cancel your lunch with Sarah tomorrow. I need you available in case I need anything." The lunch with Sarah, her one friend who still called, who still tried to maintain contact despite Marcus's subtle discouragement. Another link to the outside world about to be severed. Another small freedom removed. "Of course, Marcus." Elena walked toward the master suite, her movement steady despite the trembling in her legs. But her mind was not on the suit. Her mind was on the tiny military-grade recording device nestled in the underwire of her bra, pressed against her skin, warm from her body heat. It had captured everything. The threat, the admission of his controlling nature, the veiled confession of his violence. Every word digitally preserved in high-definition audio, time-stamped and geotagged. It was file number 127. For 3 years, Elena had been building a case against her husband. Not in the metaphorical sense, not in the way an unhappy spouse might keep a mental tally of grievances. In the literal legal sense, she was documenting evidence with the care and precision of a prosecutor preparing for trial. The recording device was just one tool in her arsenal. There were others. A journal hidden in the false bottom of a cosmetics case, filled with dated accounts written in her neat handwriting. Photographs stored in encrypted cloud accounts Marcus did not know existed. Medical records from doctor's visits, each injury carefully documented, even as she told the lies Marcus required. Falls, accidents, her own clumsiness, and most damaging of all, the security footage. Marcus had installed cameras throughout the house 3 years ago. For protection, he said, to monitor for break-ins and ensure their safety. But Elena knew the real reason. The cameras were his eyes when he was not home. They watched her movements, recorded her activities, created a digital log of her daily existence. What Marcus did not know was that Elena had access to the system. She had watched him set the passwords, memorize the codes, learned how to navigate the server from her own laptop. For 3 years, she had been downloading files. 8 years of footage stored on external hard drives hidden in the safe Marcus did not know about. Every argument captured on video. Every threat recorded for posterity. Every moment of violence preserved in high definition. Marcus had built a cage to contain her. Elena had turned that cage into a trap. And now, after 3 years of careful planning, after 127 documented incidents, after the final brutal confrontation that had left her with a cracked rib and the certainty that the next time might be the last time, she was ready to spring it. The plan she and Diana had constructed over hundreds of encrypted messages and hushed phone calls was entering its final phase. Last night's confrontation was not just another entry in a long catalog of abuse, it was the trigger. Elena walked into the closet and began laying out Marcus's suit. Her hands moved automatically, selecting the shirt, the tie, the belt, the shoes. Everything perfect, everything in its place. The role of dutiful wife performed one last time. But behind her carefully composed expression, behind the placid mask she wore like armor, a storm was gathering. Marcus Brennan thought he was a king in his castle, a master of his universe, a man in control of every variable in his carefully constructed life. He had no idea he was just a character in a story Elena was writing, a tragedy where he was the villain, and his downfall was the final chapter. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Marcus's annoyance had curdled into cold panic. Elena was not at the spa. He had called, speaking to the manager who confirmed that Mrs. Brennan did not have an appointment that day. She was not at the luxury boutiques on University Avenue, where she sometimes spent Tuesday mornings browsing for clothes that Marcus would later critique for being too expensive, or not expensive enough, or somehow inappropriate for a woman of her position. The family tracking app showed her phone in the kitchen, its screen shattered beyond repair. Her Tesla was gone. The garage, that third empty space, felt like an accusation every time he looked at it. This was not a tantrum. This was not Elena being emotional or irrational or any of the things he had sometimes called her when she failed to meet his expectations. This was deliberate, planned, executed. Marcus stood in his study, the same space where he had negotiated billion-dollar deals, where he had made decisions that shaped the trajectory of entire companies. Now he could not think straight. His mind kept circling back to the rings on the nightstand, the empty safe, the drop of blood. He picked up his phone and dialed Diana Hayes, Elena's sister, her identical twin, the corporate attorney in Houston who had never liked him, who had barely concealed her distaste during family gatherings, who spoke to him with a professional coolness that bordered on contempt. The call connected on the second ring. Diana Hayes speaking. Her voice was crisp, professional, utterly unreadable. "Where is she?" Marcus did not bother with pleasantries. His voice was a low growl stripped of all social niceties. A pause stretched across the line. Deliberate. Calculated. Diana was a lawyer. She knew how to use silence as a weapon. "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Don't play games with me, Diana. It's Marcus. Where's your sister?" "Marcus, it's 7 in the morning in Texas. Is everything all right?" The feigned concern was a masterpiece. He could practically hear her smiling through the phone. The satisfaction in her voice was barely concealed. "Elena's gone, her car, some of her clothes. She left her wedding ring. She must have called you. She always calls you when she's upset." "Why would she call me, Marcus?" Diana's voice turned cool, the professional mask dropping away to reveal something harder underneath. Something that had been waiting for this moment. "You made it very clear last year that you considered my influence on her destabilizing, that our conversations were inappropriate. That I was filling her head with ideas that were not helpful to your marriage. I haven't spoken to my sister in 3 months. Thanks to you. It was true. After Marcus had discovered their coded communication system, after he had finally deciphered the childhood language the twins used to share information, he had forbidden Elena from speaking to Diana without his supervision. He thought he had cut the final thread connecting her to her old life, the life before him. The life where she had been someone other than Mrs. Marcus Brennan. The realization that they could have found another way, that Elena could have been communicating with Diana through channels he did not know about, that he could have been outmaneuvered by his own wife, sent a jolt of fury through him. She'll be back, Marcus said, his voice hardening, speaking as much to convince himself as to convince Diana. She has nothing without me. No money, no resources, no friends that aren't connected to me. She always comes back, Diana. She doesn't know how to survive without me. Does she? The question was quiet, but it landed like a physical blow. Marcus, what did you do to her? The way Diana said his name, the weight she put on those two syllables, it reminded him of someone, of something. Then she said it, the word that made his blood run cold. Marcus, what did you do to her this time? What did you do that was bad enough to make her run? She used his first name like a curse, like an indictment. And in that moment, Marcus realized something he had not consciously acknowledged before. Diana did not just dislike him. Diana hated him, with the kind of hatred that came from watching someone you love be systematically destroyed and being powerless to stop it. Marcus ended the call without responding. The phone felt slick in his hand. He set it down on his desk and stared at the view from his study window. The Santa Cruz Mountains, the clear California sky. His empire spread out before him. But all he could see was the empty space in the garage, the abandoned rings, the evidence of careful planning he had been too blind to notice. He spent the next hour making calls to his executive assistant, Jennifer, to his attorney, to the head of security for Brennan Innovations, asking questions that felt increasingly desperate. Jennifer, I need you to do something for me off the record. Of course, Mr. Brennan. What do you need? Her voice was professional as always, efficient, reliable. Jennifer had been with him for 6 years, managing his calendar, handling his correspondence, making his life run smoothly. I need you to run a trace on all of Elena's credit cards, every transaction for the past week. And I need you to pull the security footage from the house server for the past 24 hours. Every camera, everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line, brief but noticeable. Is Mrs. Brennan all right, sir? Just do it, Jennifer. An hour later, she called back. Her tone had changed. The warmth and efficiency he was accustomed to had been replaced by something else, something that sounded like ice. Mr. Brennan, the credit cards were all canceled yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Brennan closed every account she had access to. She did it online at 4:17 p.m. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. And the security footage? Jennifer's voice was strained now, uncomfortable. She was delivering news she knew would not be received well. That's the other thing, sir. Someone accessed the mainframe last night from an external IP address, a highly encrypted one. They didn't just pull the last 24 hours of footage. She paused, and in that pause, Marcus knew what was coming. They downloaded the entire archive, 8 years worth of recordings, every camera, every moment, and then they wiped the server clean. The originals are gone, sir. Everything is gone. The phone felt suddenly heavy in his hand. Marcus set it down slowly, carefully, as if any sudden movement might shatter what remained of his composure. This was not an escape. This was a heist. Elena had not just run away from him. She had stolen something far more valuable than money. She had stolen the evidence of her life with him. She had taken the recordings that showed every argument, every moment of tension, every instance where his control had manifested in ways that should not be recorded. The mansion, his fortress of glass and steel and marble, now felt like a crime scene, and he was the only suspect. Marcus walked from room to room, seeing his home with new eyes. The cameras he had installed to monitor Elena, to track her movements, to maintain control even when he was not physically present, had been documenting something else entirely. They had been creating evidence, building a case, recording his own crimes. For 8 years he had been the hunter, the one with power, the one in control. He had shaped every aspect of their life together, making decisions about where they would live, who they would see, how they would spend their time and their money. He had been the architect of their existence. Now, standing in the cold silence of his perfect home, Marcus Brennan was beginning to understand what it felt like to be prey. The ghost in his machine was his wife, and she was already miles ahead of him. She had been miles ahead of him for years, moving in plain sight, gathering ammunition, building an arsenal while he mistook her submission for weakness. Marcus returned to the bedroom and stood before the nightstand where Elena's ring still sat. The diamonds caught the afternoon light now, warmer and softer than the harsh morning gray. He picked up the wedding band, feeling its weight in his palm. It was still warm, as if Elena had only just removed it, as if she might still be close enough to reach. But Marcus knew better. Elena was gone. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he thought he controlled, the woman he believed depended on him for everything, had vanished like smoke. And in her place was a stranger, someone he had never really known at all, someone who had been planning this moment for 3 years, someone who had outplayed him at a game he did not even know they were playing. The house settled around him with small creaks and saws, the sounds of a structure adjusting to temperature changes, to the weight of time. But to Marcus it sounded like laughter, like the house itself was mocking him. He set the ring back down and walked to the window. Outside, the world continued as if nothing had changed. Cars passed on the street below. Neighbors walked their dogs. The sun moved across the sky on its predetermined path. But inside the mansion, inside the cage of glass and stone that Marcus Brennan had built to contain his wife, everything had changed. The balance of power had shifted so completely, so absolutely, that he could not yet comprehend the full scope of his loss. He only knew that for the first time in 8 years, he was alone in the house, truly alone. And the silence, the terrible silence that had woken him that morning, was the sound of his carefully constructed world beginning to collapse. While Marcus Brennan paced the cold marble floors of his cage in Palo Alto, the true architect of his ruin sat 500 miles away in a sleek Houston law office overlooking the city's skyline. Diana Hayes sat at her mahogany desk, a portrait of controlled fury. Her office was a command center, and she was a general waging a war she had been planning for years. On one monitor, a secure file transfer bar crept toward completion. 8 years of Marcus Brennan's life. Every shout, every threat, every moment of casual cruelty, now safely stored on a server he could never touch. On another screen, she drafted an email with the care of someone arming a bomb. The recipient list was small but potent. 3 names. The 3 most influential members of the board of directors at Brennan Innovations. Men who had built fortunes on their ability to assess risk, to read character, to know when an asset had become a liability. Diana's hands did not shake as she attached the first file, a video clip, 2 minutes and 37 seconds long, high definition, crystal clear audio. She clicked play, watching it one more time before sending it out into the world. The footage was from 2 months ago. Marcus's voice filled her office speakers, and even now, even knowing her sister was beyond his reach, the sound of it made Diana's jaw clench. "You think you have a choice?" Marcus snarled in the video. "You exist in this house because I allow it. Your friends, your family, your very life. It's all a privilege I grant you, and I can take it away." The video showed him backing Elena into a corner of their kitchen. His finger jabbed at her chest with each word, not hard enough to leave a bruise, never hard enough to leave obvious evidence, just enough to make the point, to establish dominance, to remind her of her place. Diana watched the clip, her face impassive, but her heart ached with a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She remembered the phone call after that incident. Elena had been whispering, hidden in a guest bathroom, her voice trembling as she recounted the fight. "He found out I sent money to Mom's nursing home," Elena had said, her words barely audible. "He said he would cut her off if I ever did anything behind his back again. He's got me, Di. He's got all of us." Diana had made a promise that day, a fierce, whispered vow through the phone. "Not for much longer, Lex. Just hold on. Be smart. Keep recording." That promise was the fuel for the fire she was about to light. This was not just about justice. This was about reclaiming the sister Marcus had tried to erase. For years, Diana had watched him systematically dismantle Elena, isolating her from family, controlling her finances, chipping away at her confidence until the vibrant, brilliant woman she once was became a ghost in her own life. Diana had been forced to play a long, agonizing game, pretending to be civil at holiday gatherings, swallowing her rage during family dinners, smiling politely while watching Marcus's hand rest possessively on Elena's shoulder, his fingers pressing just a little too hard, all while secretly advising Elena on how to build an escape route, one piece of digital evidence at a time. Diana typed the email with deliberate care. The subject line was simple, professional, the kind of message that would not be ignored. A question of leadership. The body of the email was even simpler. Before your emergency meeting this morning to discuss the EtherCore deal, you may want to review the attached file concerning your CEO's corporate culture. More will follow. She hit send. The email vanished into the digital ether, carrying with it the first payload in a carefully orchestrated campaign. Diana leaned back in her chair and allowed herself a small, grim smile. The first domino had been pushed. The rest would fall in sequence, each one triggering the next, until Marcus's entire empire lay in ruins. Next, she opened a complex network of offshore accounts she had set up months ago using a series of shell corporations. Untraceable, legal, but barely. The kind of financial architecture that took expertise and planning to construct. With a few keystrokes, she initiated a transfer. Not a huge amount, just enough to be noticed. A precise sum moved from one of Marcus's lesser-known personal investment funds into an account that would vanish in 12 hours. It was a shot across the bow, a signal that his financial empire was just as vulnerable as his reputation. Diana looked at the photograph on her desk. Two little girls aged 7, identical in every way. Dark hair and matching braids. Same smile. Same eyes. The photo had been taken at their childhood home in Austin, before everything went wrong. Before their father's drinking got worse. Before the violence became routine. Before their mother's eyes went dead and her voice went quiet. Diana whispered to the photograph, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm coming for him, Lex. I promise." Her hand moved to another frame. This one was newer. It showed Elena standing outside a hotel room door in Houston. The timestamp read 4 days ago. Diana's tear fell on the glass, distorting the image. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you, but I'll finish what we started." The game was afoot, and Marcus had no idea he was already in checkmate. Within 48 hours, the cracks in Marcus Brennan's foundation had become gaping chasms. The anonymous video sent shockwaves through the board. His emergency meeting about the failed EtherCore deal was derailed within minutes. He walked into the conference room expecting to discuss damage control and found himself facing a tribunal. Patricia Wolf, the board chair, a woman whose steel gray hair and sharper wit had earned her a reputation as Silicon Valley's most formidable power broker, did not waste time with pleasantries. "Marcus, we need to discuss some concerns that have come to our attention." "Concerns?" Marcus kept his voice level, confident, the voice of a man in control. "Patricia, we should be focused on moving forward. The EtherCore situation is unfortunate, but there are other opportunities." "The video, Marcus." The room went quiet. Marcus felt every eye on him. "I'm sorry, what video?" Patricia slid a tablet across the conference table. Marcus looked down at the screen and saw his own face, heard his own voice, watched himself threaten his wife in high definition. "This was sent to several board members this morning, from an anonymous source. We have questions about your management style, about the culture you've created. Not just at home, but here." Marcus's carefully constructed facade began to crack. He blustered, denied, called it fabricated, a deepfake, the work of competitors trying to undermine him. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and everyone in that room could see him scrambling. The meeting ended with a polite suggestion that Marcus take some personal time, sort out his domestic situation. The phrase hung in the air like an indictment. Marcus left the building in a daze. His personal life was collapsing. His professional life was following close behind, and he still had no idea where Elena was. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in the cramped office of Frank Morrison, private investigator. The space smelled of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, despite the no smoking sign on the wall. Frank was a man in his late 50s, grizzled and cynical, with the kind of face that had seen too much and believed too little. "People don't just vanish, Mr. Brennan," Frank said, lighting a cigarette and taking a long drag. "Not in this day and age. Not with the digital footprint we all leave. Your wife was smart, smarter than you gave her credit for." Marcus bristled at the assessment. "Elena couldn't organize a grocery list without my help." Frank let out a humorless laugh. Smoke curled from his nostrils. "That's what every abusive husband says right before his wife takes him to the cleaners. You think you had her on a leash, Mr. Brennan, but she was building a ladder while you were busy holding the chain." The words hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. He started to protest, to explain that Frank did not understand, that his marriage was complicated, that Elena needed structure and guidance, but Frank held up a hand, cutting him off. Save it. I've heard it all before. Just tell me what you want me to do. Find her. I need to know where she is. And when I find her? Marcus had not thought that far ahead. He just knew he needed to see her, to talk to her, to make her understand that she was making a mistake, that she needed him, that they could fix this. Just find her. The next day, Marcus's assistant, Jennifer, walked into his office. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and disgust that made his stomach turn. She placed a single sheet of paper on his desk, her letter of resignation. Jennifer, what is this? She could not meet his eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. I received an email this morning, Mr. Brennan, an anonymous one. It had a video file attached. Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. The one from your kitchen, from the night of the Henderson Gala last year. When you... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, unable to give voice to what she had witnessed. Jennifer, let me explain. I can't work here anymore. I can't be a part of this. She turned and walked out, leaving him alone in the silence of his glass-walled office. The one person who managed every detail of his professional life, who knew his schedule better than he did, who had been loyal and efficient and utterly reliable, had just abandoned him. Marcus stood at his window and looked out at the Palo Alto skyline. From this height, everything looked orderly, controlled, beautiful in its precision and wealth. But he could feel the ground shifting beneath him, the walls closing in. 2 days later, Frank Morrison called him back to the cramped office. He spread a series of photographs across his cluttered desk like tarot cards predicting doom. The images were grainy, taken from distance with a telephoto lens, but they were clear enough. Elena meeting a woman at a coffee shop in San Jose. Elena entering a nondescript office building in Oakland. Timestamps showed a pattern. Regular meetings over 6 months. Your wife was living a double life, Mr. Brennan. Frank tapped ash into a styrofoam cup and pointed at the woman in the photographs. That's her twin sister, Diana Hayes, corporate attorney out of Houston. And that building in Oakland? It houses a legal aid clinic and a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. Marcus stared at the photographs. In them, Elena looked different. Her posture was straighter, more confident. Her face was animated, expressive. She was laughing with her sister, a genuine expression of joy that he had not seen in years. Maybe never. It was the face of a stranger. It gets worse, Frank said, sliding one last photograph across the desk. This one was taken 3 days ago at a gas station just outside Houston. It showed Diana Hayes filling up the fuel tank of a white Tesla, Elena's Tesla. But Elena was not in the photograph. Diana was alone. So she's in Houston. Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline cut through his panic. He had a location, a target. I can go there, I can find her. Frank shook his head slowly, the gesture of a man watching someone walk toward a cliff edge. You're not listening, Mr. Brennan. Your wife has an identical twin who is a shark of a lawyer. They've been planning this for years. This isn't a divorce. This is a coordinated demolition. He leaned forward, his expression serious. My advice? Stop trying to find your wife. Find the best defense attorney you can afford. Because a storm is coming and you're standing right in the middle of it. Marcus left the investigator's office with the photographs clutched in his hand. The California sun felt cold on his skin. The image of the two sisters laughing together was burned into his mind. He had been playing checkers, moving his pieces with brute force and intimidation. He now realized he was in a chess match against two queens, and they were already calling checkmate. But Marcus did not heed Frank's advice. He could not. The need to find Elena, to confront her, to reassert control over a situation that was spiraling beyond his grasp, consumed him completely. Obsession became his new reality. He saw Elena's face everywhere, in crowds on the street, in the reflection of his office windows, in the faces of women with dark hair and slim builds who turned out to be strangers. He spent hours rewatching the single security clip he had managed to retrieve from a neighbor's camera, showing Elena's Tesla pulling out of their driveway in the pre-dawn darkness. He watched it frame by frame, looking for clues, for some indication of where she was going, what she was thinking, what she was planning next. His world became a cacophony of bad news. A second video leaked, this time to a prominent tech blog. The stock price of Brennan Innovations plummeted. Investors were calling, demanding answers. Business partners were distancing themselves. He was becoming a pariah in the valley he had once ruled. But all of it was just noise, background static. The only thing that mattered was finding Elena. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. The caller ID showed a blocked number. Marcus answered immediately, desperate for any information. "Is this Marcus Brennan?" The voice was male, professional, with a weary edge that suggested the speaker had delivered bad news too many times to count. "Who is this?" "This is Detective Rodriguez with the Houston Police Department. We've been trying to reach you for the past 2 days, sir. Your assistant said you were unavailable." "Houston." Marcus's blood ran cold. "What is this about?" "It's concerning your wife, Elena Hayes Brennan. There's been an incident. We need you to come in and make a positive identification." The words did not make sense. They were sounds without meaning, syllables that refused to form a coherent picture in his mind. "Identification? What are you talking about?" "She's with her sister. I have a private investigator looking for her." There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Detective Rodriguez spoke again, his voice had softened with a practiced sympathy that police officers reserve for the worst kind of news. "Sir, a woman matching your wife's description was found in a hotel room here in Houston 3 days ago. We believe it's her. We need you to come in and make a positive identification." 3 days ago, but that's impossible. Marcus's mind raced. 3 days ago, he had been hiring Frank Morrison, staring at photographs of Elena meeting her sister, watching his empire crumble, consumed with rage at her betrayal. "Sir, I need you to come to Houston. We have a body." The word hung in the air. Body, cold, final, impossible. The 1-hour flight to Houston felt like a lifetime suspended between two realities. In one reality, Elena was alive, brilliant, a vengeful adversary orchestrating his downfall. In another reality, impossible and terrible, she was something else entirely. Marcus sat in first class, a drink untouched on the tray table in front of him, and stared out the window at clouds that looked like snow-covered mountains. His mind oscillated between denial and a terrible, creeping dread. She could not be dead. The videos were still leaking. The financial attacks were still happening. Someone was still waging war against him. Elena had to be alive. Had to be. But as the plane began its descent into Houston, as the city sprawled out beneath him in a grid of lights and highways, Marcus felt something shift inside him. A terrible premonition. A sense of inevitability. He walked into the Harris County morgue with Detective Rodriguez beside him. The building smelled of chemicals and death, a sterile coldness that seemed to seep into his bones. Rodriguez was a man in his mid-40s with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. He led Marcus down a fluorescent-lit hallway, each step heavier than the last. "Mr. Brennan, I have to prepare you. The body has been here for 3 days. We've done our best, but..." Marcus did not hear the rest. His ears were filled with a rushing sound, like blood pumping too fast through his veins. They reached a room with stainless steel tables and bright overhead lights. An attendant stood waiting, his expression professionally neutral. The attendant pulled back the sheet, and Marcus's world stopped. It was Elena. Unquestionably, undeniably Elena. Her face was pale under the harsh lights, her dark hair spread out on the metal table. The small scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall when she had tried to climb a tree higher than Diana dared. The shape of her lips, the curve of her cheek, but she looked peaceful, serene, an expression she had never possessed in the 8 years he had known her. All the tension, all the fear, all fear, all the careful guarding of her reactions had vanished. She looked like she was sleeping, like she might wake up at any moment and open her eyes. But she would not wake up. Because Elena was dead. Marcus's legs buckled. Detective Rodriguez caught him before he fell, guiding him to a chair against the wall. Marcus tried to speak, but no sound emerged. Just a gasping, choking noise that did not sound human. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Brennan." Detective Rodriguez's voice came from far away. Marcus stared at the covered body on the table. Elena, his wife, the woman he had shared a life with for 8 years. "How?" The word came out as a croak. "Apparent overdose, combination of prescription pills and alcohol. The medical examiner says she'd been deceased for several hours before housekeeping found her. We're waiting on the full toxicology report, but it appears to be suicide." Suicide. The word echoed in Marcus's mind. Elena had killed herself, had chosen death over whatever life awaited her, over the possibility of freedom, over everything. And she had done it 3 days ago. 3 days ago. While he had been staring at photographs, while he had been obsessing over finding her, while he had been convinced she was out there somewhere, orchestrating his destruction. The pieces began to click into place with horrifying clarity. The videos, the financial attacks, the systematic destruction of his life. All of it had happened after Elena's death. It could not have been her. She had been lying here, cold and still, while someone else wielded the weapons she had forged. Marcus looked up at Detective Rodriguez with dawning horror. It wasn't her. It was never her. The detective's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, recognition, perhaps, or confirmation. Mr. Brennan, given the circumstances and some allegations that have recently come to our attention, I need to inform you that you are a person of interest in your wife's death. Marcus barely heard him. His mind was reeling. He had not been outmaneuvered by his timid, broken wife. He had been targeted by someone else, someone who knew Elena's pain intimately, someone who had access to all the evidence Elena had collected. Diana, the twin sister, the corporate attorney, the woman who hated him with cold precision. She had been using Elena's death as a weapon, creating a trail for him to follow while the person he hunted was already beyond his reach. The reversal was absolute, a gut-wrenching twist that stole the air from his lungs. He had thought he was in a battle for control. He was actually the clueless subject of a meticulously executed, posthumous revenge. Mr. Brennan, I need you to stay in Houston. Don't leave the city without notifying us. We'll be in touch. Marcus nodded numbly. He stood and looked one more time at the covered form on the table. Elena, the woman he had married, the woman he had controlled and diminished and hurt, the woman who, even in death, had found a way to destroy him. 4 days before her body was found, Elena Hayes sat on the edge of a king-size bed in an anonymous Marriott hotel room. The space was sterile and characterless, chosen specifically for its lack of personality. A place where no one would remember seeing her, where she could disappear without leaving an impression. Her body was a constellation of pain. Purple and blue bruises bloomed across her ribs and arms, hidden beneath a soft cashmere sweater. Every breath sent sharp needles of agony through her chest, where Marcus had kicked her during the final assault. The cracked rib made breathing difficult, made moving torture, made existence a trial of endurance. Across from her, sitting in the room's single armchair, was Diana, her identical twin, her other half, the only person in the world who truly understood. Diana's face was a mask of grief and cold, simmering rage. She had been silent for the past 10 minutes, just holding Elena's hand, feeling the trembling in her sister's fingers, seeing the pain in every shallow breath. The drive from Palo Alto had been a blur. Every mile putting distance between Elena and Marcus felt like surfacing from drowning. Diana had met her at a designated rendezvous point in a small Arizona town, swapping cars and burner phones with the efficiency of spies. Now, in the quiet of the hotel room, with the adrenaline faded and replaced by bone-deep exhaustion, Elena finally let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. He broke my rib this time, Di. Elena's voice was a whisper. She did not need to show her sister. Diana could see it in the way Elena held herself, in the careful, shallow breaths she took. 8 years of patching up injuries had taught Diana to read the signs. The ether core deal fell through. He came home like a hurricane. I really thought he was going to kill me. Elena recounted the assault with a voice devoid of tears, replaced by a chilling numbness that frightened Diana more than crying would have. She described Marcus standing over her, his face contorted not with rage, but with satisfaction. A terrible satisfaction that came from asserting complete dominance. It's all there, Elena said, handing Diana a small encrypted USB drive. Everything. The audio from that night, the complete server backup from the house, all the financial records I could copy, 8 years of documentation. Diana took the drive, her fingers closing around it like it was a sacred relic. In a way, it was. This small piece of plastic and circuitry contained the complete record of Elena's suffering, the evidence that could put Marcus away for years. This is it, Lex. This is more than enough. We can go to the police right now. We can put him away. Elena shook her head slowly. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. The police? Di, he owns half the politicians in Santa Clara County. He'd bury it in legal fees. Paint me as an unstable wife, a gold digger, someone with a grudge. She paused, wincing as a wave of pain radiated from her ribs. And what happens to us? To Mom? He threatened them, Di. Said he would destroy everyone I've ever cared about if I left. A restraining order is just a piece of paper to a man like Marcus. He would never, ever let me go. The terrible truth settled between them. Even in escape, Elena was still trapped. Marcus's power, his wealth, his connections extended far beyond the walls of the Palo Alto mansion. So what do we do? Diana's voice was tight with suppressed grief. Elena's gaze was steady and clear for the first time in years. The fear that had lived in her eyes for so long was gone, replaced by a quiet, resolute finality. We do what we planned. You unleash the storm. You burn his world to the ground. You use that drive and you destroy him. Not just legally, publicly, financially. You make it so he has nowhere to hide. We will destroy him, Diana corrected, reaching for Elena's hand. You'll be safe here. I'll get you set up with a new identity, a new life. We've planned for this. You can disappear. Elena placed her hand over Diana's. Her grip was weak but firm. There's no new life for me, Diana, don't you see? He'll never stop hunting me. As long as I'm alive, you and Mom will never be safe from him. He'll use you to get to me. He'll never stop. A horrifying understanding began to dawn on Diana's face. Lex, no, don't even think it. We'll find a way. We'll go somewhere he can't find us. There is no such place. Elena's voice was soft but certain. He broke something inside me that night. Not a bone, something deeper. The part of me that knew how to hope. She took a deep breath, trembling with pain. He took my whole life, Diana. The only thing I have left to give is my death. Elena, please. Diana was crying now, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed her sister's hands, holding them tight. I can't lose you. You're my other half. We came into this world together. My death makes me a martyr. You, my avenging angel. It gives you the moral high ground no one can question. Makes his destruction not revenge but justice for a dead woman. He can't hurt a ghost, and he can't use our family against me if I'm gone. Elena made Diana promise, a terrible sacred vow made in the suffocating silence of that hotel room. Promise you'll finish it. Promise you won't let him win. Promise you'll make him pay for everything. Diana, her heart shattering, gave the promise. She knew she was agreeing to let her sister die, but she also knew Elena was right. This was the only way to ensure Marcus would face consequences. The only way to protect everyone Elena loved. It was the last conversation they ever had. Elena gave her sister the weapon, the motive, and the blessing to carry out the war. It was an act of ultimate despair, but it was also an act of ultimate love, a sacrifice to ensure Diana could deliver the justice Elena would never live to see. They held each other in that hotel room, two identical women bound by blood and trauma, and a love deeper than anything Marcus Brennan could ever comprehend. They cried together, mourned together, said goodbye without saying the words. The next morning, housekeeping found Elena's body, and Diana Hayes, grief-stricken and furious and armed with 8 years of evidence, began her campaign of systematic destruction. Marcus Brennan had taken everything from Elena. Now Diana would take everything from him. The Queen's Gambit had been played, and Marcus had already lost. The FBI raid came at dawn. It was not a quiet knock, not a polite request for entry. It was a battering ram splintering the custom oak of Marcus Brennan's front door. The sound of wood cracking echoing through the empty halls like gunfire. 20 agents in tactical gear swarmed the pristine mansion, their boots tracking mud across the white marble floors that had once reflected success and now only revealed shame. Marcus was dragged from his bed, the fog of sleep instantly replaced by the ice-cold shock of reality. His brain struggled to process what was happening. The noise, the lights, the voices shouting commands in a house that had always been quiet, controlled, perfectly ordered. Marcus Brennan, you are under arrest. The voice belonged to a stern woman in a Navy FBI windbreaker. Agent Sarah Chen. Her face was hard, her eyes harder. She held out a badge and began reading from a document Marcus could not focus on. Conspiracy to commit fraud, violation of federal stalking statutes, domestic terrorism, obstruction of justice. The Miranda rights were a distant buzz in his ears as they clicked the handcuffs around his wrists. Wrists that had once commanded boardrooms, signed contracts worth millions, controlled every aspect of his empire. Now bound and powerless. Through the panoramic windows, Marcus could see news vans lining his street like vultures gathering for a feast. Cameras with telephoto lenses pointed at his home. Reporters speaking into microphones, their expressions grave and excited and all at once. The spectacle of a powerful man's fall, broadcast in real time. The agents moved through his house with methodical efficiency, turning his sanctuary into a sprawling evidence locker. They were not just seizing computers and phones, they were photographing everything. The dent in the refrigerator door where Marcus had slammed Elena's head during an argument about her spending. The bedroom carpet where they used luminol to reveal faint bloodstains the housekeeping staff had missed. Every corner of his home was whispering secrets of his brutality to strangers with cameras and evidence bags. "This is harassment," Marcus protested weakly as they led him through his own living room. "My wife is dead. This is all circumstantial. A fabrication by her vengeful sister." Agent Chen paused, turning to face him. Her expression was utterly devoid of sympathy. If anything, she looked disgusted. "Your wife's twin sister has provided a very compelling case, Mr. Brennan. But the most damning evidence didn't come from her." She gestured toward his study where two agents were carefully boxing up the contents of his private safe. The safe where he kept important documents, personal records, things he did not want anyone else to see. A younger agent emerged holding a manila envelope with gloved hands. He handed it to Agent Chen like he was handling something contaminated, something toxic. Chen pulled out the contents, her eyes scanning them before she held one up for Marcus to see. It was a photograph, one he had taken himself. A close-up of a large, ugly bruise on Elena's shoulder, artistically framed against her pale skin. He remembered taking it, adjusting the lighting to capture the full extent of the discoloration. A perverse sense of pride in the mark he had left. Evidence of his power, his control. Agent Chen shuffled through the other items in the envelope. More photographs of injuries, arranged chronologically. Medical records from emergency room visits for accidents that were not accidents. Handwritten notes in Marcus's own meticulous script detailing behavioral corrections and her responses to discipline. He had documented his own abuse like a research project, a case study in dominance and control. He had told himself it was for protection, proof that his actions were measured, not impulsive. Evidence that he was in control of the situation, that everything he did was calculated and justified. Now, under the cold, harsh light of a federal investigation, he saw it for what it was. The careful record-keeping of a monster. "Jesus Christ, Brennan," Agent Chen said, her voice laced with a disgust that cut deeper than any physical blow. "You kept trophies." The word hung in the air. Grotesque, undeniable, accurate. Trophies. Like a serial killer keeping souvenirs from victims. Like a hunter mounting heads on walls. He had documented Elena's pain, cataloged her injuries, created a comprehensive record of his own crimes. And he had kept it all, locked away in his private safe, never imagining it would be used against him. They escorted him out the front door into the blinding flashbulbs of news cameras. Marcus saw the faces of his neighbors peering from behind curtains, their expressions a mixture of shock and revulsion, and something worse. Satisfaction. The schadenfreude of watching someone who thought himself untouchable finally face consequences. The man they knew as the brilliant, charismatic tech visionary was being walked out of his mansion in handcuffs, exposed as a violent, pathetic abuser whose carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled. As they pushed him into the back of an unmarked sedan, Marcus finally understood the totality of his defeat. Diana had not just exposed his crimes. She had led the authorities to evidence he himself had so carefully curated. His own compulsive need to document, to maintain control, to keep records of everything, had become the rope that would hang him. He had not just been outmaneuvered in a game of chess. He had been the one to hand his opponent the queen, the board, and the rule book, all while believing he was the one in control. The reckoning was not coming for him. It was already here, and it had been built from his own pride and cruelty. 3 months later, the federal courthouse in San Francisco became the theater where Marcus Brennan's life would be publicly dissected and judged. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the gallery, their laptops open, fingers poised over keyboards ready to capture every moment. Victims' advocates sat in solidarity, wearing purple ribbons that symbolized domestic violence awareness. The morbidly curious, who had followed the story through news coverage and social media, now witnessed it firsthand. Marcus sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit that had replaced his tailored Armani suits. He had lost weight in jail. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. 3 months in protective custody, isolated from other inmates who knew what he had done and what they would do to him given the chance, had stripped away the veneer of power he had worn for so long. But his eyes were fixed on one person. Diana Hayes sitting in the front row, dressed in a black suit that looked like armor. Her expression was serene and unyielding, like a marble statue of justice itself. When their eyes met, she did not look away, did not flinch, just held his gaze with a coldness that made him understand she had been waiting for this moment for years, planning it. dreaming of it. Marcus had hired Stephen Caldwell, one of the top criminal defense attorneys in California, a man whose reputation for getting the guilty acquitted was legendary, a man who charged $1,500 an hour and was worth every penny. Caldwell's assessment had been brutally honest during their first meeting in the jail's consultation room. Honestly, you're fucked. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The video footage alone would be enough to convict you. Add in the photographs you took, the medical records, the testimony we know is coming, and we're looking at a mountain we can't climb. Best we can do is try for a plea deal. Minimize the sentence, avoid life. But Diana had refused every plea offer. She wanted a trial, wanted everything exposed in public, wanted the world to see exactly what Marcus Brennan had done. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Morrison, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of evil humanity could produce. She laid out the case in her opening statement with the precision of a surgeon, each fact a cut designed to reveal the rot beneath. This is the story of systematic, calculated abuse, of a man who used his wealth, his technology, his influence to create an inescapable prison for a woman who trusted him, who loved him, who believed the vows he made to honor and cherish her. Instead, he destroyed her, and when she finally found a way to escape, it was through death. Caldwell tried to humanize Marcus in his opening, spoke of childhood trauma, of a father who had been abusive, of a man who had never learned healthy ways to cope with stress and anger. It was a defense of context, not of innocence, an attempt to explain rather than excuse. The jury sat unmoved, their faces reflecting the same disgust Marcus had seen in Agent Chen's eyes. Then the prosecution called Diana Hayes to the stand. A hush fell over the courtroom as she walked forward. Every eye followed her progress. She moved with a confidence that commanded attention, not as a grieving sister, but as an officer of the court with a case to build and justice to serve. She was sworn in, her voice steady as she promised to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. Ms. Hayes, Rachel Morrison began, can you tell the court about the evidence your sister Elena collected over the years? Diana's voice was clear and resonant, the voice of someone who had practiced law in courtrooms for a decade, who knew how to project, how to make every word count. I can. My sister was a victim, but she was not powerless. She was a strategist. For the last 3 years of her marriage, she treated her own abuse like a legal case she was building against her abuser. Diana gestured to a large screen set up for the jury. An image appeared, a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with Elena's neat handwriting. This journal contains detailed, dated accounts of 127 separate incidents of physical violence, over 1,000 examples of psychological abuse, including threats against our family, against our mother, against anyone Elena cared about. Threats the defendant used to ensure her compliance in silence. The next image showed audio files, time-stamped and organized. Elena wore a recording device for 3 years. She captured the defendant's voice threatening her, promising to destroy her, admitting to his control over every aspect of her life. Diana played one of the recordings. The courtroom listened in horrified silence to Marcus's voice, that chilling whisper promising to break Elena, to remind her of her place, to ensure she understood that everything she had was only because he allowed it. Several jurors flinched. One elderly woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. He thought he was asserting his power, Diana explained, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. What he was actually doing was providing admissible evidence for federal domestic terrorism charges. Then came the videos. Clips from the 8 years of security footage Elena had stolen from Marcus's server. A montage of cruelty played out on the screen in high definition. Marcus slapping Elena in their kitchen, shoving her against a wall, his voice a constant barrage of insults and commands, wearing her down with words as much as with violence. The gallery gasped, whispered. Some people turned away, unable to watch. The defendant treated his wife as property, Diana continued, her voice cutting through the murmurs. He used his wealth and technical expertise to create a high-tech prison. He monitored her phone calls, tracked her movements using GPS, used corporate resources to ensure she had no escape routes. He hired private investigators to follow her when she left the house. He installed spyware on her devices. She presented financial records showing payments to surveillance companies, receipts for software designed to monitor every keystroke on Elena's laptop. A portrait of systematic, obsessive control emerged. Marcus watched, numb, as his private brutality was dissected for public consumption. The power he had felt in those moments, the satisfaction of maintaining control, had curdled into public shame. Every person in that room was seeing him for what he truly was. A pathetic coward who could only feel strong by terrorizing someone who had vowed to love him. Then Diana's composure cracked, just for a moment, just enough to reveal the raw grief beneath the legal precision. Her voice trembled as she spoke her final words of testimony. My sister knew that leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time for a victim. Statistics show that a woman is most likely to be killed when she tries to leave. Elena knew the defendant would hunt her down, that he would use his resources, his connections, his wealth to find her. So she created a plan where her own death would become the catalyst for his destruction. She looked directly at Marcus, her eyes locking onto his. There was no hatred in them, only a vast, empty finality. She died by suicide, Your Honor, because this man convinced her it was the only way to escape him and protect her family. He didn't just beat her body. He systematically murdered her spirit until she had nothing left, until death seemed like the only door that he couldn't lock. Diana's voice broke on the last words. She paused, composed herself, then continued. She made me promise to finish what she started, to ensure that he would face consequences for every bruise, every threat, every moment of terror he inflicted over 8 years. This isn't revenge, Your Honor. This is the fulfillment of a dying woman's last wish. This is justice. The courtroom was utterly silent. The weight of her words pressed down on everyone present. Some jurors were crying openly now. Marcus felt his world, already shattered, dissolving into nothing. The Queen's gambit had been played perfectly. He had not just lost the game. He had been erased from the board. The climax of the trial arrived not with a passionate closing argument, but with a quiet statement from the prosecutor. Rachel Morrison stood and held up a document that had just been delivered to her desk by a courier. Your Honor, we have received the final results from the Harris County Medical Examiner's autopsy report for Elena Hayes Brennan. There is new information that is material to this case. Judge Williams, a stern woman in her 60s whose patience had clearly evaporated over the course of the trial, peered down from the bench. Proceed, counselor. Morrison cleared her throat. When she spoke, every word landed like a hammer blow. The medical examiner found internal injuries consistent with the assault that occurred on the night of the ether core deal collapse. Broken ribs, internal bruising, damage consistent with being kicked and beaten. But there's something else. She paused. The room seemed to hold its breath. At the time of her death, Elena Hayes Brennan was 6 weeks pregnant. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. The sound was a physical force, sucking the air from the room. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards. The gallery erupted in whispers that Judge Williams had to gavel down. Diana, standing near the witness box, swayed on her feet. Her hands flew to her mouth as a sob she could no longer contain tore from her chest. Even she had not known. Elena had not told her, had died with that secret. Marcus heard the words, but his mind refused to process them. Pregnant. The word was alien. A sound from another language. Another universe. A universe where he was not a monster. He looked from the prosecutor's grim face to Diana's devastated expression. And finally, the reality crashed down on him with the force of a tidal wave. He had not just killed his wife's spirit. He had beaten a pregnant woman. His wife carrying his child. The final brutal assault had not just been an attack on Elena. It had been an attack on 2 lives, on the possibility of a future, on something innocent and defenseless. A guttural animal sound of anguish escaped Marcus's lips. It was a sound of absolute psychic collapse. His carefully constructed rationalizations, his justifications, his belief that he had been maintaining order and control, all of it shattered. The reality of what he had done, stripped of all context and excuse, laid bare before him. His legs gave out. Bailiffs moved toward him as he crumpled in his chair, a hollowed-out shell of a man. Stephen Caldwell put a hand on his shoulder, but Marcus barely felt it. Based on this evidence, Rachel Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. The state wishes to add charges of involuntary manslaughter and fetal homicide to the existing counts. The trial continued for another week, but the outcome was never in doubt. The pregnancy revelation had sealed Marcus's fate more completely than any other evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. When Judge Williams read the sentence, her voice was cold and final. Marcus Brennan, you used your power, your wealth, your influence to create an inescapable prison for a woman who trusted you. You destroyed not just her life, but the potential life she carried. Your actions were deliberate, systematic, and utterly without justification. The court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus heard the words from somewhere far away. Life. Without parole. He would die in prison, would never again see the California sun, would never again walk through his mansion or sit in his office or make decisions that shaped anything beyond the walls of his cell. His legacy was not innovation. It was infamy. His name would not be remembered as a visionary. It would be remembered as a warning, a cautionary tale. The man who thought he could control everything and lost it all. 2 years later, a new building stood in downtown Houston, filled with light and hope. Glass walls revealed not scenes of intimidation, but rooms where women shared stories, where lawyers offered pro bono help, where children played safely while their mothers attended job training workshops. Above the entrance, elegant silver letters spelled out the name, the Elena Hayes Foundation. Funded entirely by the seized assets of Marcus Brennan, it had become a national model for supporting survivors of domestic abuse. The mansion in Palo Alto had been sold, along with the cars and artwork and everything Marcus had accumulated. Every dollar had been redirected to help women escape situations like the one Elena had endured. Diana Hayes stood at a podium during the foundation's annual fundraising gala. The ballroom was filled with donors, advocates, survivors, and press. She had aged in the 2 years since Elena's death, lines of grief etched around her eyes. But there was strength there, too. Purpose. My sister believed she was trapped, Diana told the crowded room, her voice carrying to every corner. But her legacy proves she was never powerless. Her suffering has been transformed into sanctuary. Her pain has been turned into protection for thousands of others. The wealth one man used to control and terrorize is now being used to set women free. The foundation had helped 2,847 women escape abusive relationships. It had provided legal representation for 623 custody battles and divorce proceedings. It had offered emergency housing for 1,200 families, job training that had placed 890 women in sustainable careers, counseling services for over 3,000 individuals. Elena's death had not been in vain. Her carefully collected evidence had not only convicted her abuser, but had created a ripple effect of healing and hope. Diana's personal journey had been one of slow, painful healing. She worked 60-hour weeks at the foundation, channeling her grief into action. She attended therapy twice weekly, processing the trauma of losing her twin, her other half, the person who had shared her life since before birth. Some days were harder than others. Some days the weight of Elena's absence felt crushing, but the work sustained her. Every woman she helped felt like a promise kept. Every life saved felt like honoring Elena's memory. At San Quentin State Prison, in a maximum security wing reserved for inmates requiring protection, Marcus Brennan existed in a world of gray concrete and crushing regret. He was kept in protective custody because general population would have killed him within days. The other inmates knew what he had done. Baby killer, they called him. Child murderer. Even among criminals, there was a hierarchy of evil, and he occupied the lowest rung. 23 hours a day in his cell, 1 hour in a small exercise yard, alone, watched by guards. No visitors. His parents had disowned him. His colleagues had abandoned him. Jennifer, his assistant, had testified against him. Frank Morrison, the private investigator, had provided evidence to the prosecution. Marcus was utterly alone. He spent his days with the memory of what he had destroyed. Elena's peaceful face in the morgue. The child he would never meet. The life he had thrown away through cruelty and control. Sometimes he wrote letters, though he never sent them. Apologies to Elena that could never be received. Confessions that came too late to matter. Dear Elena, I don't know when I became my father. I don't know when I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as something to control. I wish I could take it back. All of it. I wish I could be the man you thought you were marrying. But wishes don't matter now. Nothing I do matters now. The letters piled up in his cell, unread by anyone but himself. Words without weight, remorse without redemption. The cycle of abuse that had started with his father, that Marcus had sworn he would break, had ended with him. There would be no children to carry on the pattern. The child that might have been had died with Elena. And perhaps that was the only mercy in this entire tragedy. On the second anniversary of Elena's death, Diana stood alone in her office after the gala had ended. She looked at the photograph on her desk. Elena at Stanford, cap and gown, that brilliant smile. The sister she had known before Marcus, before the light went out in her eyes. Diana touched the frame gently. We did it, Lex. We really did it. Your death wasn't in vain. You saved so many people. A single tear fell, but Diana smiled through it. Not a smile of happiness, but of peace. The promise had been kept. The war had been won. Justice had been served. And from the deepest darkness, light had found a way to grow. The story of Elena Hayes began in a gilded cage, a tale of silent suffering and control. But her legacy was not one of a victim. It was a testament to the quiet, unyielding strength of a woman who turned her pain into a blueprint for justice. Through her sister's unwavering love, her tragedy was transformed into a powerful movement, proving that even when a life is taken, a voice can live on, creating a course of hope for countless others. Her abuser was left with nothing but the echo of his own cruelty, spending his remaining days in a cell he could never escape. While her name became a symbol of survival, resilience, and the enduring power of a promise kept. In the end, Marcus Brennan discovered what Elena had known all along. That true power does not come from control or fear or violence. It comes from courage in the face of suffering, from love that transcends death, from the willingness to sacrifice everything so that others might be free. Elena Hayes lost her life, but she won the war, and her victory continues every single day in the lives of women who walk through the doors of the foundation that bears her name, seeking sanctuary, finding hope, and learning that they too can transform their pain into power. The light that Marcus tried to extinguish now shines brighter than he ever imagined possible, a beacon for anyone trapped in darkness, showing them the way to freedom. And that light will never go out.